This is block 10 in the 60s, section 1, a critical elite, with the section, the Beatniks. In the midst of all of this post-war prosperity, and post-war materialism, and post-war suburbanization, and post-war advertising and television networks, many Americans were beginning to rebel against what they saw as kind of the cultural conformity and the boredom of the time. And one of the first groups to do that came to be called the Beatniks, or the Beat Generation, a term given in the early 1950s to a group that originated in Greenwich Village in New York that were dismayed at this cultural boredom, that the boring radio and boring television shows and everything kind of, in their own minds at least, looking the same as everything today as it was yesterday. Writers and poets, they kind of wore untraditional clothing in untraditional places. They claimed that they felt alienated from the wider society. They were dissatisfied with American suburban life. They did not like the consumerism that was prevalent in their day. And they yearned for what they called authenticity, authentic experiences that would make them, feel alive, experiences that would break free from the common, everyday suburban reality of most of the United States. They traveled and hitchhiked around the United States, at their will, sleeping where they would, eating what they did, and lived, a life kind of, very often in their own little communities together on the road, hitchhiking. That this guy here, this is Jack Kerouac, who's known as the father of the Beat Generation. Jack Kerouac wrote a book called On the Road, where he just kind of, it's kind of a stream of consciousness novel that he just talks about, his philosophy on life, on the church, on jazz, on sex, on promiscuity, on drugs, and poverty in the United States and the world, as he travels around the United States. And his book, On the Road, kind of became the Bible for the early, the Beat movement, and the early movement kind of rebelling against the standard norms and mores and values of American society. He was critical, in later years, he was critical that, the hippies kind of took his ideas kind of to their extreme, but he was definitely an inspiration for them through his distaste of material culture and his focus on kind of a higher plane on spirituality. That's Allen Ginsberg. Allen Ginsberg was another very important Beat. He was an American poet. His most famous work of poetry was called Howl, in which he let out this primordial scream against the modern world, against all of the things that he found stifling and conforming about the modern world. He celebrated the hipsters, the beatniks, the people who kind of marched to the beat of their own drummer, and he harshly denounced the forces of capitalism and conformity in the United States. He loved America, what America could be. He hated what America had become. He loved the promise of democracy, but felt that in the 1950s that the military-industrial complex and things like that had overtaken American democracy and was creating this soulless American creature. He thought sex was really, really important. He wrote a lot about sex and how orgasms were kind of the center of, existence in the universe, and things like the search for existential truth and, fun things like that. And teenagers who are naturally rebellious in any time, eat this stuff up. That, teenagers in general don't like to deal with the world as it is. They like to deal with the world as they wish it would be. And these Beat authors and, Beat Generation people kind of offered that up. And a lot of American teenagers were influenced by this, much to the dismay and chagrin of their parents, I assure you. But a lot of American teenagers were inspired by this, to the point where I love this is an excellent newspaper headline here. It says, "Blame these four men for the Beatnik horror. Their cult of despair is driving the teenagers to violence." And here they are. Here's Corso as a poet. There's, of course, thank you. There's Jack Kerouac, and there's Ginsberg down there with the glasses on. This was a concern that, the teenagers were doing things that teenagers should not be doing. You know, petty theft and vandalism and racing their cars and playing bad music and doing all the things that your parents accused you of doing. People were being, and the Beatniks were accused of doing those sorts of things. So this is a very important cultural movement. Now, not every teenager, of course, was a beat. And not every teenager bought into the beatnik movement, but enough did where it kind of became a cultural phenomenon, a cultural icon in the 1950s. And they are going to be, you know, the people that inspire the people who kind of take it to the next level in the 60s.